I think pretty much everyone that's going to join us has now gotten access, so that's good. People still might be coming on slowly throughout the night. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Welcome. This is the first in a series of public information sessions we're doing on the Enbridge Line 5 application. Tonight is the first one we're doing on the National Pollutant Discharge and Elimination System permit. And we'll be doing another one later on next week, and a couple more. I'll announce those later on. I'm going to have, oh, good. We got the recording started. Excellent. So we are recording the meeting, and I'm just going to go over a few housekeeping guidelines. So again, my name is Jim Ostrowski. I work in the EGLE's Environmental Support Division. In terms of housekeeping for tonight, basically all lines are muted, as you can see. And oh, there's my slide. All lines are muted, means you can hear us, but we can't hear you. That'll change a little bit later on when we get into the Q&A portion of this evening. There are a couple different ways to submit questions. You'll notice you have a little Zoom toolbar in front of you. If you don't see it now, if you hover your mouse over your screen, you should see it pop up. To type in questions, you can type them in using the question and answer box and type it into us. You can also click the raise hand icon, and what that does is it lets us know that you have a question, and when we go to the question and answer part of the evening, we'll call on your name and you will be able to, we'll unmute your mic so you can ask your question. I do see there's a few people joining us by phone only. If you're not logged in and can't see my screen and you want to ask a question, all you have to do is type *9. And when you type *9, what that does is raises your hand for us, and we will recognize you. We'll basically say the last few digits of your phone number, and we'll unmute you. So that's how that's going to work. In terms of our agenda this evening, we're just going to do some basic welcome stuff at the beginning. Then Tarek Buckmaster is going to do a presentation on the proposed NPDES discharge permit. And then we got really the rest of the evening for open discussion, questions and answers from all of you. And we have a panel here that we'll introduce at that time to go over that. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Teresa. Teresa, you there?
I'm here.
Great.
So good evening. Thank you for joining us. Tonight we're going to go over the NPDES permit application that's in-house for the Enbridge Line 5 tunnel permit. This is only for the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permit, the NPDES permit tonight. We'll have another one of these meetings next week, also on NPDES, and we'll have another one on Thursday evening to go over the resource Part 325 and 303 regulations. So I just want to reiterate that tonight is only for the NPDES permit that's open, the application that's open, and the draft permit that's been put out for public notice. We'll be presenting information on the applications tonight that are under review for consideration for that program, the NPDES program. And please note that EGLE does not permit pipelines, we permit projects. And EGLE permits the discharge of wastewater or processed waters to the state of Michigan. So that's what we'll be discussing tonight. I just want to be very clear on that. I think a lot of folks think that we're going to be talking about the development of a tunnel, and really what we're talking about is the discharge to waters of the United States, or in this case, waters of the state. So once staff have concluded their presentation on what is being requested for consideration for permitting, we'll then open the meeting to your questions and answers, and only related to the NPDES permit. So we also members of Enbridge to be present tonight to answer questions that might be outside of the NPDES permit that's in front of us, or just maybe questions that are a little beyond the scope of the application that's been submitted. So as Jim said, this is the first of 2 public meetings on this particular topic. The next one will be next Tuesday, a week from today, on September 15th. And that one will take place in the afternoon from 1 to 3 p.m., trying to make sure we're covering folks who can make it during the day and make it during the evening. So tonight's for the evening folks, and then next week for the afternoon. We're grateful you were able to join us today, and we thank you for attending. And we hope that we're able to help you gain a better understanding of the permitting process that happens, as well as the draft permit that is open for public comments today. So again, thank you for joining us tonight. And I'll turn it back to Jim, who will turn it over to Tarek.
All right, thanks, Teresa.
You're welcome.
Okay, like I said, if you didn't catch all those dates and times, I've got a slide I'll bring up at the end to help you all out. So, Tarek, are you there?
Hi, Jim.
All right, so Tarek, you can go ahead and share your screen with us and take it away. Okay, I can see it.
All right. Hello, everyone. Again, my name is Tarek Buckmaster, and I supervise the Industrial and Stormwater Permits Unit in the Water Resource Division. This unit is responsible for issuing National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, or NPDES permits, for wastewater discharges from industrial and commercial facilities to the surface waters of the state. This includes a wide range of facilities, such as steam electric power plants, sand and gravel mines, manufacturing facilities, contaminated groundwater treatment systems, and construction projects. Today, I am presenting a brief overview of the proposed NPDES permit for the construction and operation of Line 5 tunnel and the Straits of Mackinac project. Previously, I provided a presentation of the NPDES permit application submitted by Enbridge Energy. Today, I will again provide a brief overview of the application submitted for the discharge and the requested authorizations from Enbridge. I'll also provide an overview of the NPDES permitting process, and then I'll discuss the proposed NPDES permit. A few dates to note are of the public notice of the draft NPDES permit, which began August 28th and will run through August 19, 2020. Today is the first of two virtual information public meetings where the department will present information on the NPDES permit and application and answer any questions you have on the NPDES permit and NPDES permit process. The department will also hold two virtual public hearings where formal comments on the proposed permit can be submitted. The department will also hold two public meetings and two public hearings on the Part 303 and Part 325 applications for the construction of the tunnel and wetland impacts. These applications and meeting notices are also available on Michigan's Line 5 Tunnel Project website. First, I'd like to give an overview of the NPDES permit application for Enbridge for the proposed discharges. Enbridge submitted a request to discharge wastewater from a construction project for the replacement of the Line 5 segment that passes through the Straits of Mackinac, with a pipeline that will pass through a newly constructed 4-mile-long tunnel. The project will involve construction at two sites located on the north shore and the south shore of the Straits of Mackinac, covering two phases of the project, construction and post-construction. For the construction phase, Enbridge requested authorization to use water from the Straits as part of the tunnel boring operation. The material excavated from the tunnel will be removed from the tunnel as a slurry. The slurry will go through a treatment system to remove solids prior to being discharged back into the Straits. Some of the treated wastewater will be reused in the tunneling process. Stormwater from the sites will be routed to infiltration basins. For the second phase, post-construction, the proposed wastewater will be comprised of groundwater infiltration and stormwater. Groundwater will be collected and routed through an oil water separator prior to being discharged. For large wet weather events, the stormwater basins will discharge to the Straits via a control structure. Once the pipeline is constructed, Enbridge will conduct a hydrostatic pressure test to ensure the pipe does not have any leaks and will monitor and discharge the test water. The South Shore site will be the primary location of construction. The flow requested for the outfall on the South Shore, Outfall 1, is a maximum of 5 million gallons per day of construction tunneling wastewater. Enbridge estimates that the average daily flow rate will be 1.44 million gallons per day. The requested discharge flows from the North Shore, Outfall 3, is a maximum of 1 million gallons per day of tunnel construction wastewater. The application also included estimated peak stormwater flows from the outfalls. For the post-construction phase, The flow requests are much lower and based on groundwater infiltration in the tunnel, the hydrostatic pressure test, and peak stormwater flows. Previously, I identified flows of 0.015 million gallons per day or 15,000 gallons per day. However, we recently realized the correct requested flow rate is 0.00015 or 1,500 gallons per day of treated groundwater seepage. The corrected flow rate will be specified in the permit. Main concepts of the NPDES permitting program. The NPDES permitting process pertains to discharges of pollutants to surface waters of the state. The permits include multiple mechanisms for controlling the discharge of pollutants, such as effluent limitations, monitoring requirements, and other conditions for site-specific concerns. The two types of standards used to develop limitations for proposed discharge include treatment technology-based standards and water quality-based standards. For treatment technology standards, EPA develops effluent limitation guidelines, or ELGs, for particular industries. These ELGs set industry-wide standards that all wastewater discharges must attain. ELGs are often based upon treatment technologies, but do not specify the type of treatment needed to meet the standard. The other standard used are water quality-based standards, which are developed on a site-specific evaluation and the effects of the potential discharge on the specific water of the state. Again, the treatment technology-based standards look at the industry and proposed treatments. We look towards the standards developed by EPA for certain industries, and when we cannot find the industry in the effluent limitation guidelines, we can implement best professional judgment and look at the proposed treatment and wastewater types to develop limits. In this case, there are no effluent limitation guidelines for tunnel construction, so we look at similar types of discharges that have been permitted. And for this project, we utilized a dredging operations general permit and other similar permits as the best comparison for a tunnel construction project. For water quality standards, these standards are established to protect the uses of our surface waters. This includes uses such as fishing, swimming, and aquatic life. Our biologists and engineers use a variety of information from the application and existing water quality data on the water body, and then recommend limitations for parameters that are expected to be present at levels of concern. In general, draft NPDES permits are developed using information submitted in the application documents and recommendations provided from the water quality-based reviews and treatment technology-based reviews. In cases where recommendations for the same parameter are developed for both sets of standards, the more stringent value is included in the permit. As an example, if the water quality-based limitation for a specific parameter is 10 milligrams per liter and the treatment technology limitation is 5 milligrams per liter, we're required to include the 5 milligrams per liter limitation in the permit so that the permit is protective of both standards. The monitoring requirements and effluent limitations included in a permit are also reviewed for consistency with other similar types of discharges. That's a brief overview of the NPDES program and how limitations are developed and implemented in NPDES permits. Now, for the proposed NPDES permit for the Enbridge tunneling project, we can view a map to see the approximate locations of the construction sites and proposed outfall locations. If you can see it, the blue outlines are the approximate boundaries of the Enbridge construction sites. At the South Shore site, Outfall 1, will extend out from the shoreline into the straits to account for discharges when there is ice covering the straits. Enbridge also proposed an alternate Outfall 1 located in the nearshore area that may also be used. Discharges from either outfall are treated using the same process. On the North Shore, Enbridge proposed two outfalls, Outfalls 2 and 3. Outfall 2 is proposed to discharge only unregulated stormwater, which I'll discuss later in the presentation. Outfall 3 is proposed for the discharge of the treated construction wastewater from tunneling operations. Since there are construction and post-construction operations proposed, the draft permit includes separate effluent limitations and monitoring requirements based on the activity. Outfalls 1 and 3 have requirements for the construction and post-construction phases. We've also included separate monitoring requirements for the discharge of hydrostatic pressure test water. Enbridge is required to notify the department when switching from construction to post-construction phases of operation. To account for these 5 separate activities, the department structured the permit with 5 sets of effluent limitations and monitoring requirements, which I will cover over the next 5 slides. For the first slide, this is the effluent limitations and monitoring requirements table from the draft NPDES permit for Outfall 1 during construction. The limit for acute toxicity is a water quality base limit is included due to the proposed use of water treatment additives in the proposed treatment process, such as flocculants for the enhancement of solids removal and wastewater treatment. The limitations for oil and grease and total suspended solids are treatment technology based and are consistent with similar discharges. The water quality standards for pH are also included. Where you see report in parentheses, the permittee is required to report monitoring results for those parameters. This includes flow, temperature, total dissolved solids, and chlorides. Monitoring for temperature is included due to the request to discharge a small amount of non-contact cooling water, which will be reused during the tunneling process. Outfall observation and equipment inspection are daily visual observation requirements, which help ensure that water quality standards are being met. For post-construction at Outfall 1, the only processed wastewater proposed for discharge will be a maximum of 1,500 gallons per day of treated infiltrated groundwater, along with some stormwater from the site. The permit specifies monitoring requirements for total suspended solids, total dissolved solids, chlorides, and pH limitations. No water treatment additives are proposed in the treatment process during post-construction, so there is no recommendation for toxicity monitoring. Daily requirements for outfall observation and equipment inspection of the treatment system are also required. In addition, for Outfall 1, the permit includes effluent limitations and monitoring requirements for the discharge of hydrostatic pressure test water. Once the tunnel and pipeline are constructed, the permittee will fill the pipeline with water and conduct a pressure test to ensure the line does not have any leaks. When completed, this water will be monitored prior to discharge to ensure that standards will be met. The permit includes effluent limitations for total suspended solids, oil and grease, pH, and dissolved oxygen, along with requirements to conduct outfall observation and equipment inspections. Switching to the North Shore site in Outfall 3, the request for wastewater discharge authorizations is similar to the request for Outfall 1, with the exception of hydrostatic pressure test water and non-contact cooling water. The limits proposed for Outfall 3 are the same as those proposed for Outfall 1, with the exception of temperature monitoring. Temperature monitoring is not included as non-contact cooling water is not being discharged from Outfall 3. For post-construction at Outfall 3, the monitoring requirements are the same as Outfall 1 for post-construction, as the wastewater types are the same: groundwater infiltration and unregulated stormwater. Again, I will discuss unregulated versus regulated stormwater later in the presentation. Another requirement in the permit is called additional monitoring requirements. This requirement is often included in new use NPDES permits if the discharger is unable to sample the effluent prior to applying for a discharge permit. With this permit condition, Enbridge is required to sample outfalls 1 and 3 for the parameters listed in this condition every 6 months during the construction period. If upon our review of these results, we determine additional limits or monitoring is required, we can update the permit to incorporate them. The next slide will show the parameters included in this requirement. In addition to the parameters specified, this condition also requires Enbridge to monitor for other parameters that may be present and require the effluent samples be analyzed for any expected parameter. As I stated, these are the required parameters listed in the additional monitoring requirements condition. While we do not expect that these parameters will be present in the discharge from outfalls 1 and 3 during construction, we're requiring monitoring to confirm it. Now for industrial stormwater. I've mentioned that the proposed discharge includes unregulated stormwater. What that means is that the discharge does not meet the criteria to be considered regulated stormwater, and therefore the permit does not include requirements on the industrial stormwater program. To do the review, the department checks to see if the activity or industry is listed in the federal regulations by checking the Standard Industrial Classification or SIC code. Neither the activity or SIC code are listed, and therefore the requirements for industrial stormwater were not included. Since Outfall 2 will only discharge non-regulated stormwater, no limitations or monitoring requirements are specified in the permit. Enbridge will route stormwater at the site to multiple detention basins for infiltration into the groundwater. During large storage events, overflow pipes will route some flows from the ponds to surface waters. That concludes the overview of the proposed NPDES permit. Next, I'll show you how to submit written comments during the public notice period for this permit. To submit comments on the proposed NPDES permit, you must upload them into MyWaters before the end of October 19, 2020. There are two ways to access the public notice, the NPDES permit, to submit written comments on the proposed permit. You can click on the link we are going to provide, and I will show you that shortly, or you can search for the public notice in MyWaters. To conduct the search, you would open the main MyWaters page and click on the public notice search box. The next screen lists all of the public notices that are active, and these can be filtered by permit number and program. The easiest way to find the specified permit is, of course, by looking at the permit number, MI00-60278. Then click the button to the right in the same row to view the permit and application documents and to submit comments. This slide shows an example public notice posting where you can see the Documents button and the Add Comment button. For the Enbridge Line 5 project public notice, you'll see the applicant name in the fields below completed with that information. If you utilize the link that I provide later on, this will be the screen that you'll see. By clicking Add Comment, this screen will show. I wanted to point out the upload feature available where a commenter can upload a Word or PDF or other file type to make commenting easier. Or to submit comments on the proposed NPDES permit, you can click on this link. This presentation will be posted on the Michigan Line 5 website, and you can access the link there. That is how to submit comments during the public comment period, which again started on August 28th and runs through Monday, October 19th. The first link listed is the public notice search page in MyWaters, and the second link is the Michigan Line 5 website, which will have this presentation and other information, documents, and links for the project. And Jim, I think at this time we can introduce the panelists.
Great, thanks, Derek. I just want to let everybody know too that while you were talking, you probably see in the chat box, Matt Tomlinson here at EGLE sent out a couple links that you'll find of interest. So one of them is a direct link to how to make a comment. So you'll see that there, as well as some documents that are available regarding this permit application. For those of you on the phone, and there are quite a few, I'm sure you couldn't see the chat if you're only calling in for phone, and you couldn't see some of the slides that Tarek had up. The Line 5 website is www.michigan.gov/line5, and that's where you can find a lot of the information that we're sharing tonight is on the Line 5 website. All right, so at this point, we're going to introduce the panel in just a second. Before we do that, just want to remind everyone, we are opening up for questions. So if you want to ask a question, you can type your question in the question box on your Zoom toolbar. You can click the raise hand icon and we'll get to you when we can. If you're calling on the phone only, just type *9 and that'll show us that your hand is raised and we'll call on you. So let's introduce the panel. Chris, you want to start? Christine?
Hello, everyone. My name is Christine Alexander, and I manage permit section in the Water Resources Division. Permit section is responsible for issuing NPDES permits for the state of Michigan. Jessica, I'll hand it off to you.
Thanks, Chris. Hi, everyone. I'm Jessica Stiles. I'm an environmental quality analyst with the Water Resources Division of EGLE, and I am the permit rater for this project. So I will hand it to Amanda Bosak.
Hi, I'm Amanda Bosak, and I am the unit supervisor for the Water Quality and Aquatic Nuisance Control Permits Unit. And I worked on as an aquatic biologist on this permit and did the recommendations for temperature, as well as some of the additional recommendations for this permit.
Okay, I think the last person, Justin, you want to go ahead?
Good evening, Justin Bragg out of the Gaylord District Office. I am one of the NPDES wastewater compliance staff.
All right, great. Thanks. Thanks to everybody. So what we're going to do is I'm going to read off the questions that come into our question box here. And, you know, Tarek, you decide who's best to answer them. And if somebody got their hand raised, we will call on you. Nobody's got their hand raised at the moment, but when somebody does, we will call on you by name or by phone number if you're calling in, and we'll unmute your line. So first question, if anyone is willing to give an explanation of the different sample types, they'd appreciate it. 3-part, grab, etc.
Okay, I can take that. We have a number of different sample types listed in this permit. Grab samples are typically like you'd expect, is just a sample taken one time at some point in the discharge. There's 24-hour composite samplers that are sometimes used, and that's where an aliquot of water is taken over a 24-hour period every hour. And then there's also composite samples. We have 3-portion composite samples where, again, it's 3 separate grab samples taken during a daily discharge period, and those 3 aliquots are combined and analyzed. So for the most part, for this facility, we have grab samples and 3-portion composite samples specified, and it's just because of the nature of the discharge, it's going to be a fairly consistent discharge from the site, so we would expect a grab sample to be representative of the discharge coming from that facility.
Okay, thanks. This next question is about submitting comments. A person's concerned about Michiganders who don't have a computer or maybe internet access. How are they supposed to be able to submit comments on this if they don't have internet access? Can you address that?
Jessica, would you like to address that?
Sure. We posted the public notice document in 3 newspapers on August 28th, which provides a mailing address that people can use. So I will look that up really quick and put that in the chat, so that way comments can be submitted that way.
Thanks, Jessica. And we'll also read off the address too for those of you who are on the phone. So yeah, when you get that, we'll come back to Jessica. You can actually read off the address for those people that need it. How does the proposed discharge compare to other industrial discharges in Lake Michigan near the Straits?
Off the top of my head, I can't think of any other industrial discharges in that general area. We do have a few municipal wastewater discharges in that area. And, you know, as expected, you know, we tailor permits specific to a discharge type. So there are different requirements for municipal discharge versus an industrial discharge. But they do have some similar parameters, including total suspended solids. And the limits for both types of discharges are fairly similar. There's a certain amount of settling that you expect to have to remove a lot of those suspended solids, and the requirements for the Enbridge permit are very similar to the municipal permits in the area, but also to just for other similar types of discharges for sand and gravel mines or construction projects where the primary concern is the total suspended solids coming from the site.
Okay, thanks, Tarek. Are the water treatment chemicals Enbridge is proposing toxic?
Amanda, would you like to respond to that question?
Sure. We review a variety of water treatment additives in our unit. We haven't received full information from Enbridge on exactly what they're going to be doing with the water treatment additives and how much they're going to be using. But we have taken a look at the safety data sheets supplied for each one of the chemicals, and we will complete a full review on those when we get the additional information. However, we have included whole effluent toxicity testing because we don't currently have that information available to us at the permit issuance, because they are still kind of building the treatment plant or the treatment system that they'll be using. So we have included that whole effluent toxicity testing within the permit to make sure that those additives that they may be using do not cause any toxicity issues in the receiving water.
Thanks, Amanda. What happens with the discharge system if there's a spill in the tunnel?
So again, the permit's set up in two phases, construction and post-construction. So during construction, there wouldn't be any potential spills because the pipeline wouldn't be in operation. During post-construction, there's other requirements specific to spills and isolating different discharges. So the permit doesn't permit spills. It doesn't address spills per se. There are specific requirements in our boilerplate language for the permit that do address spills. But for the most part, the discharge permit is only for the requested wastewater flows and treatment. And Justin, you could maybe add to it for ways to address spills associated with the site.
Yeah, I would say that if we had a spill, if that was to occur, it'd be definitely something we would look into, see how potentially it could impact the Straits area, and go from there on making sure that it doesn't impact the Straits.
Thanks. Is there current water quality data available for viewing from the Norse site?
Amanda, can you respond to that?
Water quality data for
the North site. And they're asking specifically about, and I'm not familiar, I'm just reading this as it is here. Is that Point La Barbe, where the 003 outfall will be near a small bay that is bounded by a sandy shoal? They're referring to that area.
So we did not look at, we don't have information exactly for the discharge because they haven't started discharging yet. So we do not have information on what will be exactly in the discharge. So we don't have data from the discharge because they, like I said, haven't been discharging. Water quality specific data in the Straits area, I'm not sure if that's what the question is. I didn't look exactly to see what water quality we have available right at that discharge point in the Straits area.
Yeah, they're looking for the North site, so that might be something to reach out to Amanda directly with if you got a question about that, right, Amanda?
Sure. Yep.
Yeah. Okay, good. We have someone with their hand up. So Horst Schmidt, we're going to mute your line. So go ahead, sir.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I have a question regarding dredging standards, which wasn't clear to me. Is this project going to be done from the surface down to the bottom, or are they going to be working under the water in the rock, or is it going to be silt or what? It's not clear to me yet at this point.
For the proposed tunneling project, they're going to be tunneling through the bedrock a significant distance below the lake bed. So it will only be a tunneling operation. There's not dredging associated with that. So it is, again, something that's going to be on land. They're going to tunnel down below the lake bed a significant distance, and then construct a tunnel from the south shore to the north shore. I don't know, we do have Enbridge available. If we could possibly have them add to that response. Peter, I believe, is representing Enbridge today. Jim, if you could unmute his line.
Yeah, we're gonna see if we can unmute Peter from the audience. So. Go ahead, Peter.
Great. And what I'd really like to do is we also are joined today by Amber Pastor, who is our project manager for the Great Lakes Tunnel project. And she can probably best describe what Tarek was describing and maybe in a little more detail. So, Jim, if it's possible to unmute Amber's line, that would be best for this question.
Yeah. Good evening. This is Amber. I am here, and yes, it's my pleasure to answer that question. Absolutely no dredging will be required as part of this project. We are going to launch the TBM from a portal that we'll construct on the south side. We will go underneath the lake bed into the bedrock and remove the tunnel boring machine from a shaft that will be constructed on the north side of the strait. So there will be no work taking place on the water and no dredging will be required.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's go back to my board here. And this person's got a question about commenting. How does the public have a chance to comment when Enbridge has not submitted all the information to EGLE?
So Enbridge has submitted a sufficient amount of information for us to process the NPDES permit. So we have that application and the material associated with that, and that is part of the public notice. Enbridge is still evaluating water treatment additives. So that's typical for a number of our discharges where they submit an application and we provide a permit. And then later on, they might be submitting information associated with water treatment additives that they might use. Water treatment additive requests can be submitted anytime a permit's in effect. So a number of our facilities in the state regularly change their water treatment additives, and that's something that's done through the permit review, but it's done outside of the permit issuance process. So this is fairly typical for what we do. And so they did provide us with some preliminary information. We do have some concerns about aquatic toxicity. So we included the acute toxicity limit in the permit. But all of our reviews for any water treatment additives will be done when that information is submitted. Amanda, if you'd like, you can add to that if you think you need to.
So sure, as I said, we do a full review of the information submitted when they have it kind of a little bit more nailed down for the use of the water treatment additives. We have some protections in place in the permit, just knowing the nature of the additives that they will be using. They also are required to submit additional information when they do start to have a discharge that will be reviewed over that permit process, and we can always make changes to the permit as needed based on any information or data that is submitted under the current permit.
Okay, thanks. Next question. Can the application be complete if there is no planned water treatment system yet?
Enbridge does have a planned water treatment system. They have a proposal for what will be in operation for the treatment of the tunnel wastewaters prior to discharge. And again, the permit establishes monitoring requirements for that proposed system or for the proposed wastewaters discharged from that system. But Enbridge has information in the application describing the treatment system, but they could possibly revise it slightly from what's proposed, depending on what's required to meet the effluent limitations and be protective of water quality. But the information we do have in the application is sufficient for meeting the requirements. Peter, you could possibly add to that to provide additional descriptions for the treatment system.
Thanks, Tarek, and we'll do our best. And Amber, maybe you could start, and then if necessary, we can pass to Jeff.
Absolutely. So I got cut off there. I had a moment of panic where I lost my audio. So I understand we're asking about the water treatment. So we have both. It's called a slurry and water treatment facility. So we have both. I think the important thing to remember here with the slurry and water treatment is that it's designed to make sure we consider quality, quantity, erosion and sediment control, as well as complying with all the environmental requirements and conditions. So our system is, our slurry separation and water treatment facilities are designed to go through essentially a 3-step process. So in the first step, primarily the larger solids are removed. So we're going to remove those larger solids by the use of screens and a piece of equipment called hydrocyclones. I'll take you back to your high school chemistry days if you ever worked with a centrifuge kind of idea. Then once they go through that system, there's a secondary separation. This is where they go through a filter press. So that's where we're going to continue to remove now those sediments and particles that might be in the water. And then finally, they would go to a water treatment. So that's where we're going to do our pH stabilization and any type of sand filtration. So at each step, we've got those 3 discrete steps for treating the slurry and ultimately the water. And I think the important takeaway with this is that by design, our slurry and water treatment systems are closed systems. And what that means is we have full control over when and how water is discharged back into the lake. So that means we can ensure that no tunnel water is released into the lake if it hasn't been treated, tested, and measured, and that we are in full compliance with the environmental requirements and conditions. So that's kind of, I hope that was enough detail. I can go into great detail on the 3, within each of those 3 steps, there's quite a bit more detail. If you refer to the filing though, you can really get into the weeds. But I hope that that was adequate for now.
Okay, thanks. We're just going to continue on with a few more questions here, Tarek. Looks like got some more coming in. And it's a follow-up to that last one, I guess. Another one was, will the public have the opportunity to comment on water treatment?
So the public can comment on the proposed treatment system that's identified in the application, and Amanda just briefly covered. As far as the water treatment additives, the specific additives in use or proposed to be used, that is not included through the permitting process with this issuance, so that comments can be considered for the water treatment additives proposed that are included in the application, but if there is additional information submitted outside of the permit process, that's not something that is available for the public to comment on.
Okay. Here's another follow-up to another question we had earlier about water quality, I guess, in the area. They're asking if you have not looked at existing water quality, how can you judge the discharge impact?
Amanda, would you like to respond?
Sure. So as I think was stated by Tarek earlier, we make site-specific recommendations, and all of our recommendations are made to meet water quality standards. So it doesn't matter all the time in our reviews what the current water quality is at a site, which we can certainly take into consideration if there is some site-specific data available. And if you do have information like that available, you can submit it in with our comments, in with your comments. But all of our reviews and all of our permit limits and monitoring are based on meeting the water quality standards, which are developed to be met for any surface water of the state of Michigan.
Okay, thanks, Amanda. Can you speak to how the permit limits were set up to reflect similar activities such as dredging? It appeared that one of the slides mentioned a similar activity as dredging.
Yes, so we don't have necessarily water quality standards associated with total suspended solids. So when we need to identify an appropriate limitation for total suspended solids, we often refer to similar permit types or discharges and do an evaluation of the standards included in those permits for use in other permits. So for construction, because of the nature of this, it's a water that's being utilized to remove solids. It's creating a slurry. The water is effectively acting as a vehicle for transport and relocation of the material removed from the tunneling project. It's very similar to what is typically done with hydraulic dredging, where water is sucked up into a tube, it brings other materials into that tube and is run to its separate area for settling and treatment. And so we evaluated similar discharges, so looking at sand and gravel mines, construction projects, dredging operations, and looking at what the total suspended solids capabilities are of those systems, and then utilizing that information to develop the total suspended solids limits in this permit.
Okay, thanks, Tarek. I just want to remind the people that are on just the phone calling in, if you have a question, you don't want to forget about you. If you have a question, just type *9 and that'll show us that your hand is raised. We got, I think, about 8 people that are called on the phone. So hit *9 on your phone and we will call on you. All right, back to questions. Back to treatment questions. On the treatment system, when are you using a flocculant and what is a specific additive?
Okay, Peter, we probably should have Amanda, or Amber, I'm sorry, respond to this.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Amber.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So previously when I was describing for you those 3 stages of our slurry separation facility, it's at that second stage, in the secondary separation at the filter press, that we would add those types of compounds, the flocculants and the coagulants, to make the smaller particles kind of stick together and remove them. And in that case, you actually use a centrifuge and or a filter press to do that. So it would be at the phase 2 of our slurry separation process.
Okay, thanks. And Amber, I forgot to do this earlier. We unmuted your line, but could you tell us what company you work for? Just introduce yourself, I guess.
Yeah, sure. So I am Amber Pasteur, and I'm the project manager for the Great Lakes Tunnel Project.
Okay.
And I work with Enbridge.
Okay.
And I work for Enbridge. Yeah.
Thank you. Just want to make sure that's clear.
Yeah.
All right. Back to the question board. In light of the current social distancing situation, have you projected supply and demand for what you are transporting through tunnels? And if so, what is it, and would it outweigh the cost of the project with or without environmental damage? I don't know if that's so much an EGLE question, but Tarek, what do you think about that question?
It's not really something that it's under the review of the NPDES permit.
Right.
You know, there are other methods for considering those factors, but that's not something that's part of our review.
Yeah. Okay. What part of the 3-part water filtration removes the chemicals? Do you guys have an answer for that?
I do, yeah. This is Amber. So at each step, the system is being designed. So at each of those steps, the chemicals are being removed. Obviously, in the step 2, we would add some as well for the separator. So, but at each of those steps, and especially then when you get to that water treatment as well, is when you'd be making sure you understood the chemicals and the impact. But each of those steps, the chemicals any kind of additives that we had would be being removed within each of the steps.
Yeah.
Okay.
So as part of the water treatment additive submittal, the applicant is supposed to identify the residual chemical that's expected to be present in the discharge. And so when we do that evaluation, we'll review that information and make a determination whether there's a significant concern about what is expected to be remaining in that discharge. And, you know, again, if it's part of the system, it's utilized, it's a coagulant, it attaches to the solids and it's removed through treatment. And so there's an expectation that there'll be very little left in that system at the point of discharge.
Okay. Again, back to some of the wastewater questions, and in terms of EGLE here, how will bentonite be separated from the wastewater? What is EGLE doing to guarantee that there won't be a bentonite slurry spill into the lake?
Bentonite,
sorry.
Yeah. Well, we do have regular monitoring requirements. We have outfall observation, equipment inspection, so that's something that's done on a regular basis to ensure that the system's operating properly. You know, if there are issues with the system, Enbridge is required to notify us. You know, we do have compliance and enforcement oversight at the site, and you know, that will be something that is part of our insurance of standards being met and the compliance of the permit being maintained. Amber might have something to add to what their preventative measures are for that system also. Amber, can you add to that response?
Sorry, I was talking away on mute there. Yeah, you actually nailed it very well. I mean, it is a closed system. It is the slurry bentonite. The bentonite mixture comes back through a series of slurry pipelines. It comes back into the slurry separation treatment facility. So it's controlled, it's on site. We are set back from the lake as well. So, you know, we have all kinds of, like you said, equipment inspection, quality aspects that we're monitoring, because we don't want that either. We don't want to be having slurry spilling in the tunnel. We don't want it to be getting on the site as well around where our treatment facilities are. We want a good, clean site. And that's just part of good construction management. And it is also part of staying in compliance with the regulatory requirements. Full stop. It needs to stay where it's meant to be.
Thank you.
This is a question that came up, I think, earlier. I just want to make sure we addressed it. Other than similar discharging processes that were looked at, is there anything similar to dredging? Are there other similar discharging processes that were looked at that are similar other than dredging? Okay.
Yes, so other construction projects, we have had some other similar type situations. Obviously, it's not a tunnel through the Straits of Mackinac, but it's that we do have other types of construction projects where there is the potential for having a large total suspended solids concentration or load going to the receiving water. So we have incorporated limits from those permits. Also sand and gravel mining are very similar permits where there is mining done in an active location, and then there's dewatering of that mine, and there has to be a sufficient amount of settling involved. And so we do have standards in place from a couple different general permits and some individual permits that we've utilized to set the total suspended solids standard in this permit.
They're asking, are you specific? Do you know specifically what other construction projects you might have been referring to?
I can't think of anything specific. It's just a general review of what we have in effect or in historical permits that have been utilized. And so it's just a comparison of those numbers and just determining what is the best professional judgment type treatment technology based number for total suspended solids.
Okay. Under the Michigan Environmental Protection Act, comprehensive environmental reviews of major projects like this should be conducted to assure complete impact of the project environment is assessed. EGLE has at least 2 permits under consideration, and the MPSC is committed to an environmental review. Will these various state actions be reviewed comprehensively?
Well, you know, this is an NPDES permit application and review and proposed permit. You know, we take into account the other reviews. There's a number of information available for other permitting processes or approvals that have been considered or at least were made aware of. So it's not really necessarily a comprehensive review of all information submitted, but it's specific to the NPDES permit and the surface water discharge. And that's our primary focus on doing this evaluation, but we are aware of the other permitting requirements and processes in place.
Okay, thanks, Tarek. This person again is going back to the whole water quality issue that I think Amanda was discussing, and it being Great Lakes being a specific ecosystem. They're saying if you do not look at the quality of the specific discharge point, how do you know if sensitive species are not present and impacted? So I don't know if there's a way you could discuss how we look at species in the area, sensitive species.
Sure, we do a review of what's available to us through the Michigan Natural Features Inventory database. We have access to that, and we do a review for sensitive species at all of our new discharge locations. So that review was completed for this evaluation. So we did take any sensitive species into account while doing that review and making our recommendations for either limits and or monitoring that have been included in the permit.
Okay. Person here is saying there are other states in this EPA region, Environmental Protection Area region, that had tunnels built. Will you be reviewing those projects to inform your consideration of this permit?
You know, we're aware of other tunneling projects in different states involving different areas of the Great Lakes, and it's something we can consider. We've didn't utilize those permit requirements to develop this permit. We're not aware of any specific permits issued associated with the projects, but we are aware that there have been some similar projects in the area.
Okay, thank you. We got a couple of questions here that were specific to the tunnel itself, and this meeting is geared towards that. It's towards the NPDES wastewater discharge application. So we're not really going to get into those. I want to remind people that you can also raise your hand if you have a question. If you don't feel comfortable raising your hand to ask a question, then you can also type your question in. So it looks like we do have another question from Mr. Schmidt. So, sir, we're going to unmute your line.
All right. Yes, I have a question about staffing. Are you going to be adding staff to this project if this project goes forward? And are you actually going to have people on site to be sure that the work that's they're claiming is being done properly is your staff is able to verify that?
Justin, would you like to respond to that question?
So I will be the compliance staff person for the project. As for adding staff, if anything comes up with the project, obviously I can go there and inspect it anytime I need to. We can say that right now. But yeah, I'll be the compliance staff person for it. And if we need help on the UP end, I know Marquette has said they could have somebody help us as well.
Yeah, just to add, we have staff in place. We have staff associated with certain counties, perhaps even certain types of discharges in certain counties. So, you know, we do have an NPDES compliant staff person assigned to that area. It's Justin, and Justin will be in contact with the permittee to make sure that the compliance is handled for the permit and that all applicable requirements are met.
Okay, thank you. While I'm waiting for some more questions to come in, I'm going to put back up on the screen the information about how to submit comments. And Jessica, you sent in the chat the email or the mail address for those people that might not have internet access to mail in a comment. And I can read that off for if anybody's on the phone and needs to get that, so get your pencil ready. If you want to mail your questions, should go to Jessica Stiles, Jessica, Stiles, Stiles, and permit section, WRD, it's Water Resources Division, and EGLE, EGLE, that's P.O. Box 30458, Lansing, Michigan, 48909-7958. Again, to mail in your comment, it should go to Jessica Stiles, Permit Section, WRD EGLE, PO Box 30458, Lansing, Michigan 48909 7958. And there's several other ways to submit comments too up on your screen, and also in the chat. There's a direct link to the comment area in My Waters that you can go to submit your comment. I think we've wrapped up most questions. Hey, Tarek, if people have questions that are kind of outside the scope of this meeting, because there are a few that came up that are outside the scope of this meeting, mainly directed to the maybe pipeline itself, how would you recommend people go about asking those questions, or who should they ask those questions to about all sorts of things related to the pipe itself, or the tunnel, I guess I should say?
Chris, you could jump in too if you'd like. The NPDES permit comments, comments for the, should be submitted through My Waters for the NPDES permit and application. We also have the meetings associated with the resource permitting. So anything associated with the siting should be submitted as part of that public notice. And as far as the overall project, I'm not quite aware of how those comments should be submitted. I don't know if that's the Michigan Public Service Commission. Is that something that's part of their review and consideration?
I'm going to ask if Teresa is on the line. I think she might be able to offer some assistance on where general pipeline questions can be submitted. Teresa, are you able to help us?
Sure. So if it's something related to the actual permitting or the approval of the pipeline itself, that needs to go to the Public Service Commission. And if you go to the Line 5 page, the information to MPSC is also listed on the Line 5 page. It's a multi-agency page, so you can go there and find the link in which to submit comments related to the actual pipeline itself. Because those are not, we don't regulate pipelines, so we regulate the project. So it's important to make sure you're reaching out to MPSC on that. If you have other specific questions, that are unrelated to this, there'll be other opportunities through either MPSC or the PHMSA or U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. If it's a question related to the 325 or 303 aspects, those public meetings are coming up also, one on Thursday afternoon, and then again in 2 weeks, in 2 more weeks, we'll have another one related to that. So I guess it just sort of depends on what the specific question is, but I'd start with MPSC if it's related to the actual construction and authorization of the pipeline.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, Teresa, you made it clear earlier that what we're talking about tonight is the wastewater discharge aspects of this project and not the tunnel itself, correct? And
Correct.
That's what this application is for, coming to EGLE, right?
Correct.
Right. So that's what we're regulating. Justin, I have a question for you. So I know you popped off, but maybe come back. Somebody's actually asking for you, Justin, on compliance monitoring. It sounds like this will be treated as any other NPDES permit. How large a workload do you have? I guess we're asking about workload.
So I do cover other facilities.
And hey, Justin, can you bring your mic a little closer, because another person had said they had a hard time hearing you.
Can you hear me better?
Not really.
Let me see if I can turn it up for you.
Thanks.
I'll just talk a little louder. Does that work better?
A little bit, so just to speak up. Yeah.
So obviously I do have other things that I cover as well, but if anything happens, anything comes down with this, obviously it's going to be priority. So I can set aside other things or adjust things to make sure that we take care of this and make sure that the straits are protected, is how I would say that.
Yeah, Justin, you're out of the field office up there, correct?
Yep, out of Gaylord.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Gaylord field office. Okay. Okay. All right, I was just checking to see if any other questions related to this particular application has come in. what I'm going to do is, I don't see any more specific to this particular application. Like I said, we did go over a few of those other things earlier. Okay, so I just want to let everybody know that we've got a couple other opportunities for public information, and I put those up on the screen here. This session itself will be done again on the 15th at 1 o'clock. So if there's somebody that you know that missed this particular session on the NPDES permitting aspect, we'll be doing another public information session on the 15th at 1 o'clock. That's not on the board here, I realize that. And then we're also hosting a couple of public information sessions on the resource side of things, which is the wetlands impact. We mentioned this earlier on a Part 303 and Part 325 permit applications. So this is like the wetland impacts, and those sessions are going to happen on the 10th at 1 o'clock, and then again the same thing on the 21st at 6 o'clock. So it's an afternoon and evening session for that as well. It'll be run very similar. And then we have the hearings, and the hearings are where you can actually make your official comments. So a lot of you submitted some questions that are probably more like comments. And so if you have an official comment you'd like to make, that's where you make it. It would be in one of these public hearings. And you'll have the opportunity to verbalize your comment, or you can either type it in addition to the other options that we provided earlier. And so we have the permit hearing for this application, that NPDES, the wastewater discharge application, 2 hearings, one in the afternoon on 29th, 1 o'clock p.m. on the 29th, and then a hearing at 6 o'clock p.m. on October 6th. Okay, and then the resource permitting, we have, again, 2 hearings scheduled. This again is for the wetlands impacts on October 1st at 1 p.m. and October 8th at 6 p.m. in the evening. If you missed any of those dates, all this information along with a bunch of other stuff can be found in the Line 5 website. It's EGLE's, that's the state of Michigan's Line 5 website. It's michigan.gov/Line5. All right, now I guess we're taking it to wrap up. Tarek or Teresa, did either of you have any comments, parting comments?
Sure, a couple things. One, there was a request early on during some of the process meetings for a summary of the very large geotechnical report, and I'm happy to report that that was submitted today by Enbridge. It is now in the My Waters file, and it's also being loaded to the Line 5 page. So for those of you who were concerned about having to review that very large multi-thousand page report, there is a smaller summary of the project of the geotech work that is now available. So you should be able to access that today, either in My Waters, or hopefully it got loaded to the Line 5 page today, but if it didn't, it'll be up very shortly. So that's good news. That'll definitely shorten your review. Please note that we did extend the comment period, and so it's way until October 19th. So you have plenty of time yet to get your comments in and do the review that you want to do. And we welcome your comments. Make sure you're sending them in either through My Waters or through the mail if needed. And then we look forward to hearing from you and having your substantive comments during the public hearing. So thank you for participating tonight. We really do appreciate it.
Thanks, Teresa. And that geotechnical summary report that you mentioned, there's actually a link in the chat. We sent that out. So if you look in the chat, it says link to additional Line 5 documents. You click on that, you'll be taken to that document that you just mentioned. I think it's posted up there now, so that's good.
Great.
Okay, well, I want to thank our panelists here tonight that were with us for answering the questions that came in, and Tarek for a presentation. Thank you all for joining us tonight and taking time out of your evening to learn more about this project and ask questions. Like I said, there's be other opportunities, information sessions and hearings to get more information. And also michigan.gov/Line5 is the main website where you go to find a lot of the resources that were mentioned at tonight's hearing or at tonight's public information session. So with that, thank you all for joining us, and have a great rest of your evening. Thank you.